Hi, welcome to the Boss Body Podcast. This is Sarah Haas. I am so happy you're here, and I have the most amazing show for you today. I am so excited. One of the things I've shared with you guys, if you've been with me for a while, is struggling with self-love, with not feeling good enough, with like a harsh inner critic, beating myself up, and I know that I am not alone in that. I hear it from so many women that I work with all the time. And we've talked about where that comes from. It comes from, growing up and messages we heard or things that happened to us. Maybe it was parents, maybe it was peers or teachers or relationships or coworkers or bosses, whatever. We pick up all these things throughout our lives, and it causes us to be really harsh and really hard on ourselves. And in the end, disconnected from ourselves. And what I did and have done, and I'm always a work in progress, but what a lot of us do is we try to heal that by accomplishing or trying to be better or trying to be perfect. And the truth is, no one else can heal us. Nothing external can heal those wounds. It has to come from within. And that's why I am absolutely beyond thrilled to have Dr. Margaret Paul on the show today. She is a best-selling author of 15 published books. She's a relationship expert, co-creator of the powerful inner bonding self-healing process. She's appeared on all kinds of radio and television shows, including Oprah, which just blows my mind. That is just incredible. She's also successfully worked with hundreds of thousands and taught classes and seminars around the world for over 56 years. And her most recent book is called Lonely No More: The Astonishing Power of Inner Bonding. Dr. Margaret, I cannot thank you enough for being here. It is absolutely a thrill and an honor to have you.
Well, thank you so much. I'm happy to be here, Sarah.
Well, I am familiar with your work, and trust me, I have been devouring all your content over the past since we've been introduced over the past little bit. And so I know what inner bonding is, but I would love for you to dive into that to the listeners who may not have heard that term before and sort of explain what that means.
So, inner bonding is a six-step pathway for people to learn to discover the false beliefs that may be controlling their lives, to discover who they really are and their true soul self, which we call the inner child. It helps them develop a loving adult, a powerful, spiritually connected, loving adult. It helps them learn to connect to a higher source of love and truth and guidance. That's part of what inner bonding does. It's such a powerful process. It's been life-changing for me and for the hundreds of thousands of people that I've worked with. I love the process. I've been practicing it now for over 40 years because Dr. Erica Chopich and I met 41 years ago, and she had half the process and I had half. And so, of course, we had to meet and put it together, and it's been evolving all that time into just an incredibly powerful process.
That sounds amazing. And I love that you all came up with this. Two people came together
Mm.
because we all bring something to the table, right?
Right.
So, will you talk to me about that, the trauma that we have stored inside and where that comes from, and then how that affects our relationship with ourselves? Because basically, what I'm hearing you say is inner bonding is kind of that relationship with yourself. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's right. It's learning to be the mom and dad to yourself that you might never have had. And most of us did have some trauma. It doesn't mean that our parents were trying to traumatize us, but most of our parents were not healed. They did not know how to role model being loving to themselves. They did not role model taking responsibility for their own feelings, their own happiness, their own peace, their own fulfillment. They often role modeled using self-judgment, like you talked about, being critical of themselves, being critical of us, turning to various addictions, overwork, food, drugs, whatever. We just didn't learn to really be conscious of our own feelings and take responsibility for them. And this is what inner bonding does. But because they were unhealed, we absorbed their false beliefs. We absorb what we call their ego wounded self that's filled with false beliefs. And we absorb that from them, like you said, from teachers, from media, from peers at school, all over the place. We absorb false beliefs that we may be operating from that are really re traumatizing ourselves. That's the problem. We may have been traumatized in ways like that were severe with physical abuse, sexual abuse, deep neglect, but we could also be traumatized by a lot of judgment, by just being ignored, by having our feelings not validated. There's so many ways of being traumatized. And if we continue to abandon ourselves in the ways that either they abandon us or they abandon themselves, we continue to re-traumatize ourselves. And this is one of the things that most people don't realize is that they can do all kinds of trauma therapy, all kinds of years of psychotherapy. But if they don't understand what their false beliefs are, how they're treating themselves, what they're telling themselves, how they're abandoning themselves, that trauma doesn't actually get healed because they're re-traumatizing themselves. So it can't get healed when we're treating ourselves the ways we were treated or the ways they treated themselves.
And so, if we have not healed this trauma, even though we think we may have, if we really haven't, and we're operating from that place of these false beliefs, how does that manifest outwardly? What does that do to us and to our lives? How do we know if we're doing that?
Well, we know by how we feel. But the problem is, so many people have learned to avoid their feelings that they don't even know that they're abandoning themselves. I've isolated four major ways of self-abandonment. One is judging yourselves, being harsh on yourself. Another is staying up in your head because our feelings are in our body. And most of us, we couldn't manage big feelings when we were little. So we learned to dissociate from our bodies and stay up in our head and not even know what we feel. And another way is we numb our feelings with, there's so many addictions in our society, so many ways to numb out. And a fourth way is that we make others responsible for our feelings. Now, of course, this greatly affects our relationships with friends, with family, with a partner, because if we're abandoning ourselves, what we're doing, like I said, is re-traumatizing. We end up feeling alone. We end up feeling unloved because we're not loving ourselves. And then in our relationships, we end up trying to have control over getting somebody else to love us in the way that we weren't loved. Well, trying to control someone is one of the major reasons why relationships fail. Nobody likes to be controlled. And the major ways we've learned to control is with anger or blame or compliance, giving ourselves up, going into resistance, withdrawal, shutting down, withdrawing love from the other person. All of these things create huge problems in relationships. But if we're abandoning ourselves, we're leaving our inner child alone inside. And that inner child needs love. And if we haven't learned to love that child, then we're going to try and control somebody else into doing it. And one of the problems is that we meet at our common level of self-abandonment or our common level of self-love. So if you're looking for a partner, but you're abandoning yourself and you're looking for somebody to complete you, to make you happy, make you feel safe, make you feel worthy, that person's going to be looking for the same thing. And then you get together, and of course you can't do that for somebody because, like you said, this is an inside job. We need to do this for ourselves. And so then we get together on that common level of self-abandonment, and there's no way for the relationship to actually work. It may look like it does at the beginning, but it doesn't take all that time all that long for the controlling behavior to come in, and then the passion and the aliveness that was there at the beginning just evaporates out of the relationship. And so it's so important to be learning to truly love yourself, to take responsibility for your feelings. Loving yourself means a lot of things. On the physical level, it may mean taking hot baths, getting your nails done, eating well, getting enough exercise, getting enough sleep. But on the emotional level, this is where we haven't had the role modeling. You may be doing great financially, being a loving adult, taking responsibility for your finances, hopefully, for your organization. But how about for your feelings? Very few people learned how to take responsibility for their own feelings. And this is what people learn about in inner bonding. Learn to be that truly loving mom and dad for that inner child who is our feeling self. Our soul usually communicates through feelings instantly. That's your inner knowing, that's your intuition. And if you've learned to ignore your feelings, it's like you're trying to go from here to New York, where I am in Colorado, to New York without a roadmap or signs or anything. You just get lost because your feelings are your feelings is the roadmap. Your feelings are the roadmap that let you know instantly whether you're loving yourself or whether you're abandoning yourself, what's happening with another person, whether that person can be trusted or not, whether there's somebody dangerous. Our feelings are vital for our safety and well-being, but so many people are completely disconnected from them.
Oh, I could not agree more. A lot of what you just said resonated with me deeply. I I was in a marriage for 17 years and on the outside and it checked off the boxes. Everything was okay, but below the surface, I was giving away all my power. I
Right.
was allowing things that I should not have allowed if I valued myself truly. There was so much toxicity and so much going on, and it was hard for me to face that. And when I started thinking about leaving the marriage and going to therapy, I did sort of start uncovering a lot of these patterns that
Mm,
I had grown up with, and now I was repeating in my relationship. And it was almost like a veil was lifted, and suddenly I could
right.
see all this stuff about myself. And then once I did, the pieces started to fall into place and
Mm,
I wasn't feeling my feelings. I was rationalizing with my mind like, well, this looks okay, so it must be okay, right? Why wouldn't I be okay? That doesn't make any sense. On paper, this all looks good. And I was very disconnected. I was tired all the time. I was numbing out with television, just sort of in the evenings. I just didn't want to think. So I would just zone out as much as I could. And it was an amazing transformation. And I'm so grateful for the process. Not that it was easy, but I'm glad that you pointed out some of this, I guess you'd call them symptoms or outward manifestations. Like if you're judging yourself all the time, check. If you're in your head all the time, check. If you're having some like addictive behaviors, numbing out, check. If it's affecting
mhm.
your relationships, check. So I think a
Right.
lot of the women listening are going to absolutely be able to see themselves in this. And that's one of the struggles is I would hear this term self-love, self-worth, and I would think, well, how do I know if I love myself? How would I know if I didn't? So you've given us some really, really good keys of look at this, and if any of these are speaking to you, maybe you need to go a little deeper. And
Right.
so if women listening are resonating with this, which I know they are, how do they start this process? Because it can be really overwhelming and you're thinking, okay, this is me, but now what? Where do I start? What can you
Well,
share a little?
yeah, we actually have a free 7-day course on our website at innerbonding.com. That's a place to start. As you said, I have all these books out. One of them is the Inner Bonding Workbook. That's a great way to learn inner bonding, or the new one, Lonely No More, The Astonishing Power of Inner Bonding. I work one-on-one with people. We have a fabulous training program. So we have many certified facilitators who work with people. They can learn it that way. I do a master class. It's actually a master circle twice a month where I work with people. I do an inner bonding process. I talk on a topic, and then I do these laser sessions so that people can see inner bonding at work. And I also have a podcast. And so there's a lot of ways. On our website, there's thousands of articles that'll be very, very helpful for people. So there's many, many ways of learning inner bonding. But I wanted to say that my story is similar to yours, although I was married for 30 years with 3 kids. And and at some point I got to be very ill because I was that caretaker. I was, tap dancing around, doing everything for my husband, my kids, my parents, my clients, everybody. You can't do that and not get sick because it completely wears you out. And so I was really sick. I mean, doctors were saying, you got to do something here because your immune system is shutting down. And I had been eating all organic since I was 22 years old. And so it wasn't the food. I'd been exercising every day, but I didn't know anything about taking responsibility for my feelings. And so when Erica and I created inner bonding and I started to practice it, I realized, oh my God, I mean, this is why I'm sick, is because I just am completely out of touch with my own feelings. I'm not taking care of myself at all. I'm just taking care of everybody else. But it was really scary because in a long marriage, you hope that your partner loves you and your kids and your parents. And I was really scared that if I stopped caretaking them and started to take care of me, I was going to find out that they really didn't love me, that they loved how I loved them, how I took care of them. And that is what happened. I lost my 30-year marriage. 2 of my 3 kids were mad. My parents disowned me. But I got my health back really quickly and my work soared. And so even though it was hard, I don't think I'd be alive today if I hadn't started to practice inner bonding. I really don't believe that I would have been alive because I was so sick. And so for me, it was life changing. It was hard. It was challenging. I needed support, but I look back and I would have done the same thing again, even though it meant a lot of loss. But you know what? If you lose yourself, you got nothing. If you lose your health, you got nothing. And so, even though it was hard and scary, getting me back and getting my health back meant everything.
Yeah, I had a similar, we have such similar experiences. My listeners know that I'm a breast cancer survivor, and that was about 5 years ago. And that was sort of my next phase of peeling these layers back and tapping into myself and my heart and what was going on. And I agree with you 100% when you're operating at a level of stress. And I also have over the years struggled with anxiety and depression, which I know has been part of your story as well,
Mm.
and the toxic marriage and the doing everything for everyone and having my own business and just juggling and never wanting to appear like I was struggling or that I was tired and never wanting to let anyone down and saying yes to everything. My immune system got lower and lower and lower, and my body was talking to me. It was saying, "You're tired, you need to rest, you need to slow down." And eventually it manifested itself into illness, just
Yeah,
like
that's
with
right.
you. Yeah, in
That's
my case, it was cancer. It could be autoimmune, it
right.
could be the flu. It could, I also fell and broke my wrist about a year ago, and that was, I believe that falls also happen when you're
Right.
overstressed. And it's sort of the universe's way of literally like knocking you upside the head and saying,
That's right.
girl,
That's
you got to slow down. You got to tap in. You've got to give yourself the rest and the care and the love and the attention. And as women, we don't naturally do that. That's not what's been modeled for us.
No, we don't. And then we wonder why we don't feel well and we're not happy. But, for me, because I had already been eating so well and because I'd already been exercising, once I started to take care of myself, my health bounced back full force. Energy came back. So this was over 40 years ago. Last Sunday, I had my 86th birthday.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah,
Congratulations.
yeah, and I actually have more energy than most people a third my age. People watch me and say, "Where does she get all that energy?" But
Yes, you're
that's
just
because
glowing. I would never guess that you were in your 80s. Never, never. At least 20 years younger.
yeah, thank you. But the reason that I tell people this is because you need to know that taking care of yourself is vital. Taking care of yourself physically, emotionally, spiritually is vital. You don't have to get old and decrepit and have your later years be miserable with illness. I just feel so grateful for my health at this point because I was not a healthy kid. I was a sickly kid, which is why I started eating so healthy at 22. I was tired of being sick. And so I started eating all organic. I've been doing that for what, 65 years now, I guess, a long time. And I'm very careful what I put in my body, and I do exercise every day. But inner bonding has been the key here. Without that, like I said, I wouldn't be alive today. And so I really want to encourage people to go to our website, take the free course, begin to learn how to take loving care of yourself, how to take responsibility for your feelings. I look back at my parents who did the best they could. They weren't bad. They just didn't know how to love. And I never saw either of them when they were upset or depressed sit down and say, I wonder what I'm doing. I wonder what I'm telling myself. I wonder how I'm treating myself that's causing this. It was getting mad at me, getting mad at my mother, getting mad at my father, blaming everybody around. Um, no responsibility at all. And that's what most of us learned. We learned all those ways of abandoning ourselves and not taking responsibility for our feelings because we didn't have any role modeling. And I don't blame my parents. They were doing the best they could. They wanted to be loving. They just didn't know how. And so we want to stop that, don't we? We want to stop. I mean, I wish I had known inner bonding when I was raising my kids, but at least at some point I became a role model for them, and I think it's never too late to be a good role model.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. And I'm with you. My kids were 9 and 11 by the time I finally decided to leave my marriage. And a lot of people say, "Oh, we stayed together for the kids." Well, I I got separated for the kids because I wanted to model self-care. I wanted to model
Right,
standing up for myself. I wanted to model moving away from things that didn't serve me. I made a
right,
whole lot of more mistakes before and after that, as we all do. And I think
right.
that's important for you to say that our parents, most of them have done the best that they can.
That's right.
I know that some people listening have suffered terrible traumas.
Yeah,
There's a whole spectrum of trauma. There's
right,
sexual abuse, physical abuse, but there's also just messages that we learned
right.
and
That we absorb. Yeah,
releasing the people in our lives who taught us those messages from um I call it forgiveness. And it really just means saying this was the best they could do with the tools
right.
they had, with what they learned, with their emotional health. And now I'm going to move on and realize that they couldn't be there for me in the way that I deserved for them to be.
Yeah, and that's right. And blaming them for it just keeps people stuck. I mean, certainly we want to know what happened. But blaming our parents for doing the best they could. I mean, there are some parents who are really dark, evil people and set out to hurt their kids and use their kids, and that's horrible. And I've worked with trauma, really, really, really deep trauma for many, many, many years. I've been trained in many ways of dealing with trauma. But most of the people I work with, their parents didn't mean to hurt them. Some of them did, but most of them didn't. And so to hang on to that blame and resentment just keeps people stuck. We do need to forgive. We need to let go, and we need to recognize that healing now is within us. It's within our power. And one of the basis of inner bonding is something that's very important, and that is the concept of intention. And in inner bonding, there's only two intentions. One is the intention to control, getting love, avoiding pain, feeling safe. The wounded part of us, the ego wounded self, loves to try and have control over people and events and outcomes, which it doesn't have, but it likes to think it does. The other intention is the intention to learn about loving yourself and sharing your love with others. These are like polar opposites, the intention to control or the intention to be loving to yourself and to others. And if you look around our world, unfortunately, there's too much of the intention to control going on, way too much of the intention to control, and not nearly enough of the intention to be loving, take responsibility for oneself, and to be able to share love with others. We can't actually share love if we're abandoning ourselves. We don't have love to give if we're not loving ourselves. And so when we learn to love ourselves and fill ourselves with love, then we can give to others without an agenda, without trying to control. Because a lot of people like you and I was giving to get something back. I was giving to have
Yeah,
my husband not be mad at me or to approve of me or to love me. But I mean, that's not love, is doing something with an agenda. And the only way that we don't have an agenda is if we're loving ourselves and filling ourselves with love. And then it just comes overflowing without an agenda. And that's what creates good relationships.
absolutely. I remember when, after I went through my divorce, I made a decision because I realized that one of the reasons I have stayed in relationships is because I was afraid of being alone. And that had
Oh,
repeated itself over and over again throughout my life, staying in relationships where I knew I wasn't happy, where I knew I wasn't being treated well or getting my needs met or whatever. But I was afraid to be alone. And so I started healing that and started thinking about why isn't it okay for me to be alone? What is it that I'm missing that I am
right,
trying to fill with someone else? And that's that control. That
right.
is looking to someone else to give you what you need to be able to give yourself. And
That's
I
right.
made a decision then and there. I will not seek out another relationship until I feel like I don't need a relationship. I just want one.
Good, good for you. That's great. That's just great.
Yeah, and it took me a long time to get to
Yeah,
that point. And there's still the need to control that pops up a lot, controlling outcomes,
right.
especially. I'm a type A overachiever. I like to have my ducks in a row and know the exact outcome, but we don't have control over events or outcomes.
No,
And I love what you said about just start with loving yourself because then when you fill yourself up with that love, it can flow out. I mean, that's
right.
the whole point of life is love.
Right. And that's why it's so important for people to establish a personal spiritual connection because that is our source of love. And that is one of the things we teach well in inner bonding is how to access that higher knowing, that higher guidance, which we all have and which we all have the capability of tapping into. It's just that so many people, like when I would be intuitive with my parents, they would tell me, don't be ridiculous. Or I would say something that was on the spiritual level. My parents were atheists, and it just, I mean, that just wasn't allowed. And so I had to find my own way. And that was part of what was life changing is knowing we're never alone, being able to tap into that source of love and be open to it, which happens when you're open to learning, when you're really open to learning about loving yourself and you're treating your body well by putting in good, clean food, because the junk food lowers the frequency of your body and makes it hard to connect. Spirit exists at a higher frequency than we do. And so we have to raise our frequency with our intention to learn about loving ourselves and putting good, clean food into our body. And when you do that, it makes it a whole lot easier to access, especially if you're out in nature, which has a high frequency, to access that higher guidance. which is, in itself so life-changing because being able to ask what's loving to me right now, I mean, that's incredible to be able to ask that and get answers. What's loving to me right now? What's in my highest good right now is amazing. And that's how I live my life right now. I don't let my ego tell me what I should be doing. I go straight to the source of love and truth and say, okay, what's loving to me right now? And then I do it.
That's awesome. Because when we're talking about controlling outcomes and just being so having our blinders on that I have to make this certain thing happen. We're not being open. We're not asking for divine guidance.
Right,
We're gonna miss the messages. We're gonna miss the places that we're meant to go or the things that we're meant to do because we're gonna be so tunnel vision focused on that one thing. And
right.
I love you said, you know what? What's going to bring me happiness right now? What's going to bring me joy? What's going to feel good? Because I don't think we give ourselves permission enough to do that.
That's right. That's right. What's loving to me right now? What's in my highest good right now? These are such important questions to ask.
I love it. I could not thank you more. That is just such a wonderful message. I want to mention to everybody listening that Dr. Margaret has a beautiful gift for us. It is a 1 month free um, entrance to the inner bonding circle, which in that circle bi-monthly she brings participants through the inner bonding process, and then she'll speak on a topic, and then she'll also do laser sessions with participants using the inner bonding, so you can get into this a little deeper. And I'm definitely in, so I'm going to make sure you guys have the link in the show notes so that you can grab that. And I also want to mention that Dr. Margaret is one of the speakers in my free virtual retreat experience called The Nourished Woman that is going on right now. We have 23 powerful, powerful speakers, including myself, including Dr. Margaret, all on the topic of nourishing ourselves, mind, body, and spirit. And her presentation is amazing. She lays out the 6 steps of inner bonding. So she's taking us even deeper into some of the things that we've been able to touch on today. So if you are not registered for that event yet, it is going on now. I'm going to also make sure that the link is in the show notes, and you can also go to nourishedwomanexperience.com. Dr. Margaret, thank you. It was such an honor and a pleasure having you today. Thank you so much for being here.
Sarah, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank you all for listening. It's always an honor to have you. I appreciate you letting me be part of your life, and I will see you soon.